Busy week, but let's start with news from Wednesday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed a joint session of Congress. While he was walking in, I saw you shook his hand. You also posted a photo with him on social media. So were you able to talk to him? What was meeting him like?
Yeah, I actually talked to him a few times, and honestly, he's really funny. I just told him first time meeting him, I said, God bless you and everything that you're doing. But when I was able to chat with him on the floor, I talked with him a little bit about his KFC comment, and I mean, he seems like he has a very good energy, very mellow.
He did have a very strong energy. He gave a really impassioned speech that was almost an hour long. What did you make of his remarks to Congress?
I think that they were right on. And the one thing that I really appreciated is that, and I actually stood up and clapped when he said it, is he said, we're not asking America to put boots on the ground. And I respect that, being a veteran, especially with my foreign policy stance and perspective. So I appreciated it.
During this speech, your colleague, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, she held up a sign that said war criminal on one side and guilty of genocide on the other. And there were reports that you then went over to sit next to her and there was some sort of confrontation. A, was there? And B, can you bring us to that moment?
I don't really like to divulge private conversations on the floor, but what I will say is that, there's a time and a place to make your voices known and heard. And on the floor, we actually do expect a certain level of decorum. So we're not supposed to have signs, and we're definitely not supposed to be making protest or political statements at that time. But, she did, if you saw in that exchange, did put this sign down briefly, and I appreciate that. But I also am just going to further say this, and that I think right now what you're seeing is a lot of tensions, especially in the Middle East, and with good foreign policy, especially foreign policy under a future President Trump administration. I think that those tensions will subside, and I'm hoping that eventually what's happening in Israel will stop. And so I think her and I both share that same sentiment.
And you did talk about foreign policy at the RNC last week. I will get to that in a moment. But former Speaker Nancy Pelosi was not a fan of Netanyahu's speech. She did make a statement. On X, she posted this, quote, Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States. Many of us who love Israel spend time today listening to Israeli citizens whose families have suffered in the wake of the October 7th Hamas terror attack and kidnappings. These families are asking for a ceasefire deal that will bring the hostages home, and we hope the Prime Minister will spend his time achieving that goal. What do you make of her statement?
Well, her own party can't agree on the position of Israel, or if Israel's even a country. You have a massive movement within the Democrat Party that refuses to acknowledge Israel and is actually promoting, I would say, organizations as well as people that are sympathizers to Hamas. And so it was ironic because you had a number, I think 20 Democrats didn't show up, but then also half of the Democrat delegation was actually standing up and applauding Netanyahu. So I think that it was a terrible foreign policy blunder that she didn't show up for this, and then that she would choose to use that time to really attack Netanyahu. But again, Nancy Pelosi also said that, if illegals don't come here, who's going to pick the crops? So I'm not surprised.